the veils. So I'm going to talk about another cycle that's important because everybody's really in tune to this one because there's some negativity attached to it. Retrograde, Mercury retrograde and all of this. This is one thing I tend not to pay attention to because it has too much power and control over the minds of people. And that is retrograde, particularly Mercury retrograde. Does anyone actually know what is physically happening in Mercury when it is in retrograde? And what the purpose of retrograde is? Okay. Does one know? And this is very, very peculiar because when you ask most people, BMW 3063, when you ask most people, BMW 63 and all you guys out there, hardly anyone knows what is happening, really, in a physical sense. They only know that when it's announced or on the calendar or in the horoscope of the retrograde, that's all they know. They really don't know what is happening and don't know why it's happening. So they don't take advantage of the retrograde. So I'm going to draw a picture so that you can be wiser about this particular cycle. And it is within the law of rhythm. When Mercury goes into retrograde, and Mercury isn't the only thing, but it's the most popular retrograde. So let's talk about it because everybody knows about it. I like to talk about things that people know about and you can easily go do your own information gathering. Really easy. Right? When Mercury is in retrograde, just picture a planet just going in an orbit, right? It's going in an orbit. It's going to go around the sun, blah, 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 blah. But nothing in orbit goes straight in a straight orbit like that, like they draw it on the picture. What happens at certain times is the planet is going in that orbit, but then it goes around and loops, creates a loop. Loops back around and then goes back into retrograde. So, let's talk about the loop because that's the retrograde part. The planet goes down like this in a loop. When it's in the loop that goes backwards away from its normal orbit, that's the retrograde. It's going away from its natural orbit for a second and then loops back around and goes back into its natural orbit again. When it's going back like that, that is the retrograde. That is the science of why retrograde exists. Now, what should you be doing, see, during that retrograde cycle while it's in that loop going backwards? And then once it starts the loop going in its direction again, it's out of retrograde. It doesn't have to be exactly in it, but when it's in the loop going back into it, then it's out of retrograde because now it's going back into its normal cycle. When it's going back in the loop, that is retrograde. And that is an opportunity to go back energetically or to do things that you left behind in the past. You see how it's going behind? See how that's supporting you going back? Maybe there was something you were supposed to do that you didn't do. Retrograde supports that. How many times have you ever heard this about retrograde? How many times have you ever heard what retrograde actually supports? It supports you going back to pick up something that you left behind, to do something that you didn't do in the past. Whatever it is that is sitting back there that needs to be addressed, retrograde supports that. So when you see retrograde in that way, you see retrograde as a fantastic tool of second chances. And when you're exercising that second chance and you put it into action, then it doesn't work against you like most people think. Oh, Mercury is in retrograde. You heard the stories. You shouldn't be signing any documents. You shouldn't be, all the shouldn't. You're just shouldn't your way out of everything. We should be emphasizing what you should be doing in retrograde. Right? That's what we should be doing in retrograde. The cycle is like inverted. No, it's not really inverted. Inversion means it's doing something it's not supposed to do. Inversion means, it should be up, but it's down. That's what this reality does. Inverts things to keep you confused. If you are outward facing and you're not going within, you're going to fall into those inversions. But those inversions do not exist within you. That's why going within is so key. The reason why it's not an inversion, because it is a natural part of the planet cycle to do that. It is natural for Mercury to go back and then loop and then come back around. It's natural. Inversions in this case are things that are not natural to something that exists. So we go back to heal old wounds also. Yes, absolutely, Spirit Fire. That's what Mercury Retrograde would be great in supporting. If you wanted to go back and heal, Mercury Retrograde would be great in supporting that. And suddenly everything happens so much easier when you're doing that kind of activity. During the retrograde. Yeah. So this is the knowledge of knowing life. See, because when you know this stuff, you know life, you know yourself. Knowing the moon cycles and when it's not outside of you. It only exists because of you. Knowing what the cycles, the annual cycles are doing is knowing yourself as well. Because everything is a representation of you. The equinoxes, the springtime, summer, fall, winter, they all say, hey, it is best to do this right now. Springtime, it is best to plant right now. Summertime, it is best to check on your crops to make sure they're healthy right now. Fall, it is best to harvest those crops because they are now ready and they've borne the fruits of your labor from spring when you sowed them. Reap them and celebrate what you have done and your work that you've done in tandem with nature. Give gratitude to the earth and the plants who have worked to support you, and support them back by fertilizing the soil, not overtaxing them, and giving gratitude and giving the earth what it needs. Become a caretaker so that next spring you can have abundance again. Wintertime, enjoy the fruits of your labor. Chill, relax, plan the next year. Do the things that winter supports, and so on and so forth. And then life will be easier. Same thing with the annual cycles, the equinoxes, the lion's gates, the equinoxes, and I can't remember the March 21st, I think, November. The longest day of the year, and I think the shortest day of the year. You get what I'm saying. Right? So when you work with nature, and you work with the signs that tell you what is going on, your life will be easier. your life will be easier. And so, as you do that, and you start to do that, things will come along to try to discourage you. Like the theories that I've espoused earlier about theories that are silly concerning the moon, theories that are silly concerning what the shape of the earth is. Because those people, you can never convince them. So don't waste your time with them, you know? Don't waste your time with them. You could tell them the earth is round. You could tell them go into an airplane, hot air balloon. You'll see. They're never going to believe you. So you go about your way and go within. So, because outside, that's what you run into. You can be aware of what's going on out there. But when you're within, and you go within yourself, then you start to see the truth. And sometimes when you see the falsehood by looking outside of yourself, you have a giggle. You don't get confused. You have a good laugh. Right?